Well, when it comes to public policy and global relations, few people have the respect my next guest does. Fareed Zakaria is an Indian-born American journalist and author who believes his adopted country's success will hinge on our ability to adapt to new changing dynamics in the global economy. I was able to sit down with Zakaria shortly before he spoke to the Tulsa Town Hall. Well, Mr. Zakaria, with the price of oil roughly half of what it was just this past summer, we've been reminded here in the middle of energy country just how much a part we are of the global economy. Any thoughts there from you?
Well, you're right to highlight it. That is the single most important trend, economic trend, but even political trend that's coursing through the world right now. The fact that oil has gone down so fast and so far. I suspect the price of oil is going to stay in this range. It's probably overshot on the downside just as it overshot on the upside, but it's likely to stay in this range, and I'll tell you why. There are two factors that are at play here. The first, and probably the most important, was the decline in demand, particularly from China. China had been the great sucking sound that was taking in all the oil, all the marginal oil. For the last 10 years, China had grown its oil demand 7% year after year. In 2014, the growth in Chinese demand in oil was zero. So that's the big shift that took place. And the other one, of course, we all know is the rise of American production, but production also around the world. Those two forces are still in play. China's demand has weakened. America will continue to pump oil. So I suspect that we're in a world, a new normal, where oil will be in the perhaps $60 range. And this is going to put enormous pressure on all the oil-producing countries in the world that have large populations. Qatar and the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait will be fine because they don't have any people. But when you're like Russia, you have 140 million people and you have subsidies and you have government expenditures. That's a hell of a challenge. For America, it's basically positive. For most Americans, it means a huge tax cut. A cut in the price of oil is a tax cut. Obviously, for producers in America, that puts a lot of pressure. But American producers are the most efficient producers in the world. And so I suspect that you will find American producers find ways to cut costs, find efficiency, and of course, some wells will close down.
Mm-hmm. Now, getting into the conspiracy theorists, the geopolitics of it all, this hurts Russia. This also hurts Iran. Saudi Arabia is not particularly fond of Iran, and right now we have been at odds with Russia a bit. Have you heard any of that talk in a wider sense?
Oh yeah, of course, and especially in the Middle East, people think that this is a U.S.-Saudi kind of deal, conspiracy. Highly unlikely. First of all, this hurts the Saudis. Don't make any mistake of it. The Saudis can't afford to bear the pain, but there's real pain here. Saudi Arabia needs oil at about $85 a barrel to be able to balance its books, to not run a deficit. Right now, they are having to draw down tens of billions of dollars from their foreign exchange reserves. They'll probably have to spend $100 billion this year out of their foreign exchange reserves to simply fulfill the commitments they've made. So this is tough on them. Secondly, I think that whole way of thinking about oil prices is a relic of the past. Here's the most interesting fact about the last year or two. In 2014, for the first time since the first oil shocks of the early 70s, non-OPEC oil production was larger than OPEC oil production. In other words, there is no cartel that can set prices anymore. There's just a lot of supply out there and a lot of demand, and the price, like the price for almost everything, is now increasingly set by those raw market forces, not by a bunch of sheikhs sitting in Abu Dhabi or Dubai.
Without the energy boost that we have become used to here in Oklahoma, many believe our economy could look more like the national economy this coming year. What do you think the national economy is going to be like this coming year?
I think the American economy is going to pick up substantially. I think the country is going to grow over 3%. I think we will be the fastest growing large developed economy in the world by far. That is to say, if you compare the United States to Japan or Europe. The United States looks probably the safest rich country in the world, the most prosperous rich country, and the most dynamic. But of course, you're right. There are the oil-producing states, Oklahoma, Texas, North Dakota, now with natural gas, are going to feel some of the pressure. 9% of the American economy is tied to oil. That compares with, I think, 70% of the Saudi economy. So we're in a very different situation. It's a diverse economy, and there will be substitution. But remember, this is good. Pressure is what causes countries, companies, people to reform, to adapt, to change. So Oklahoma has made some very important investments that will actually bear fruit. All that will begin to matter, and there are many areas where things will still continue to do very well, agriculture and things like that. So I don't expect that there will be a kind of crash in Oklahoma, but yeah, it will be the boom times, as you well know, can never last forever.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned a skills-based culture. In terms of workforce, how is our economy changing?
The fundamental change that is taking place is we are moving increasingly and rapidly to an economy in which people who can manipulate symbols and knowledge, by which I mean numbers, words, concepts, are going to do well. And people who use their hands to make things are going to find it more challenging, because those tasks that used to be done by human muscle power are now being done by machines or by Chinese and Indians. So either you can find somebody who can do it much cheaper than you can halfway around the world, or you find a machine to do it. So the entire focus of our country should be, and our economy should be, how do you get knowledge workers? One of the great tragedies I find is that at this moment, the federal commitment to basic research, basic investment has declined. We're at the lowest levels of federal funding for science in 40 years, at the very moment when we are trying to create a knowledge-based economy. It should be the opposite. We should be spending 2 to 3 times as much as we're spending on basic research, basic development, because those are going to be the industries of the future. We're not going to have a huge steel industry in the future. Those kind of jobs are just going to places like China and South Korea. But we could have advanced manufacturing. We could have software design. We could have all those things that require knowledge power.
Mm-hmm. So we're not talking about an economy that's full of PhDs, but an economy where the workers are certified and skilled.
If you look at the manufacturing we get, there are jobs there. There are fewer jobs, but they're higher paying. But those people, that's right, they need real skills. But those skills are about, as I say, the manipulating of symbols, numbers, words. So it's software programmers. It's people who know how to operate complicated computers and machines, which inevitably now means they have to understand some software. If you look at the whole world of entertainment, which is a huge industry, the big jobs are in design, in program management. So none of these jobs are PhDs. These jobs are often, you could do it with a bachelor's degree. But you do need to focus in on the kind of skills that are going to be important. The sweet spot is actually to have a strong understanding of computers and software with some kind of creative sensibility. So if you are the English major who understands computers, you could work on the next Frozen, right? And those are big industries. We forget about them sometimes.
You have been quoted as saying we are in a new age of thinking. Where do you see that we may be stuck right now in the old age?
Perhaps the most important way in the United States is it's what happens to people, it's what happens to companies, and it's what can happen to a country. Your success blinds you to the new world. We're doing fine. America is doing very well. It's a powerful, dynamic economy. But we're not, as a result, we're not looking around and asking ourselves, what could we do better? How's the world changing? And the world is changing very profoundly. One decade ago, 10 years ago, China made up about 1% of the global economy. Today it makes up 10% of the global economy. The so-called emerging markets, China, India, Brazil, made up 20% of the global economy. Today they make up 45% of the global economy. Within 5 years they'll be half the global economy. It will be all these third world countries that nobody ever paid any attention to. So when you start to see those kind of changes, if you look and ask yourself, where's the tallest building in the world? It is now in Dubai. Where's the biggest bridge in the world? It is in China. Where's the largest oil refinery in the world? It's in India. That's the new world. And to ask ourselves how we can take the greatest opportunities there, we have to recognize that we tend to be parochial. We tend to be somewhat comfortable with the world we know. and understandably, it's worked very well for us, but it may not work that well for our children.
Fareed Zakaria, thank you for your insights. Now, I was able to speak to Zakaria as part of the Tulsa Town Hall's lecture series, and their next speaker is James Bradley on February the 27th. Now, he's the author of the best-selling book that was made into the acclaimed movie Flags of Our Fathers, the true life story of the Marines and Corpsmen who raised the flag on Iwo Jima.